Welcome to the exclusive Smithsonian Revolts, the Voice of the People exhibit. In the last 50 years, revolts, riots, and rebellions have ravaged American society as the country's people continuously seek change from obstacles of oppression. The citizens of the United States of America never shy away from exercising their freedom of speech and disputing institutions of power to live the lives they were promised under the US Constitution in a country built off of the democratic and republican principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Though all protests highlight the power of the people and their determination to stand and act against obstacles of oppression, revolts in the last 5 decades have conditionally catalyzed social, political, and economic change in the United States and to different extents. For example, the six-day riots that occurred following the acquittal of 4 officers who brutally beat Rodney King, the LA or Rodney King riots fought against the systemic idea of police brutality and for police reform. Rioting and looting occurred as the destruction of LA property exhibited the outrage of people of the city and the rest of the country and how they sought to force change within the justice system. Despite exposing the cruel truth about the reality of police brutality to the rest of the country and the world, the acquittal of the charges of the officers involved, and the minimal government action regarding the justice system and police demonstrates the inability of a revolt to act as a catalyst for change. Excuse me. This is also seen 28 years later with the Black Lives Matter protest of 2020. Fighting for the exact same causes following another murder of an African American in the name of George Floyd at the hands of the police. The fact that after 28 years, the Black community are still fighting for identical flaws in society goes to show the minimal effect of the LA riots in terms of accomplishing the reformation it sought to. And even with more than 450 protests erupting in the space of a few months, almost no change has been done for the protection of the Black community and the reformation of police to cease police brutality against African Americans. Also, the two photographs of the two events are almost identical, once again speaking to the lack of change and the persistence of police brutality and systemic racism issues over the 28-year period between the two protests. On the flip side, however, the abortion rights protests of 1972 is the polar opposite. 10,000 people gathered in Central Park pushing for the legislation of abortion and the protection of women's rights over their own bodies, stamping their pro-choice beliefs into the American people. The protests highlighted the need for women's rights beyond abortion to live freely and with the liberty they please in a country that advocates those ideals. Within 9 months, the ratification of Roe v. Wade ensured the protection of pregnant women's liberty to choose to have an abortion without government restriction. And to demonstrate that it is not merely an issue with race, the occupation of Alcatraz involved 89 Native Americans occupying the infamous Alcatraz Island as part of a 19-month protest. Spanning from 1969 to 1971, with their goal to bring attention to past injustices and contemporary issues confronting Native Americans. Their protest accomplished the passage of more than 26 pieces of self-determination legislation and Supreme Court decisions that enhanced and returned the sovereign powers of Native nations. And so these differing results from demonstrations showcase how protests and revolts conditionally act as a catalyst for change. Despite the social turbulence caused by the Los Angeles riots of 1992 and the Black Lives Matter protests of 2020, both fighting against the same issue of systemic racism and police brutality. Minimal governmental change was done to protect the rights and lives of the American people from police brutality and in society as a whole. We can also see how these demonstrations lead to change, but to different extents. For example, Roe v. Wade was ratified only months after the pro-choice protests that made abortion fully legal, while the Native Americans protested for 2 straight years on an abandoned island in order to gain some of the power they once had.